Go ahead, sir.
Thank you so much. Well, neurological examination is an equally important part for a spine examination. Without that, you can't come to a final diagnosis. Uh, Let us understand if a patient of spine is able to walk and allowed to walk. Both are important. Able to walk and allowed to walk. If the spine is unstable, very tender, don't make the patient walk. If the patient is able to walk, one may find out something about the deficit from the gait itself. I'll show you a few examples. This patient, a patient of old spinal trauma, has got a bilateral foot drop. Once he turns around, you can see the telltale mark of the old spine trauma, showing a low dorsal deformity. So if the patient is able to walk and allowed to walk. Similarly, a patient who has got a cervical myelopathy has got a staggering gait. He walks with a wide base gait. You can see that. And there is a hint of a stagger, particularly when the patient turns around. Please see that. Yes, that's right. Wide base gait, staggering as if trying to catch his balance. Is typical of a cervical myelopathy. Then gait of a sciatic scoliosis, a very, very guarded gait. Will give you an example, will give you an indication that probably there is a acute disc prolapse. I'll not go into the details, but again, I'll just repeat, if the patient is able to walk and allowed to walk. Now let us come to neurological examination in particular. At the end, once we have conducted the examination, we should be able to tell what type of deficit it is, upper motor neuron or lower motor neuron, what is the extent of deficit, what is the level of neurological injury, what is the correlation with bony lesion, and whether it is a plane of compression, whether it is extradural, intradural, or intramedullary. We should be able to answer all these questions once we have conducted the examination. Well, of course, it always follows a particular pattern of going through higher mental function, cranial nerves, motor system, sensory system, bladder and bowel. Well, higher mental functions and cranial nerves are not that important for a PG who's going for an ortho exam, but just make a small note of the thing, whether the patient is well oriented in time, space, and place. Similarly, in the cranial nerves, just observe to look for any cranial deficit. I will not spend any time on this. And let us come to the motor system. The motor system, please understand, I have repeated in my last talk also, a particular sequence is the most important thing. If you follow this sequence, which I am showing it to you, you will not miss any point in the exam. As far as the motor system is concerned, talk about bulk, tone, power, and reflexes in that order. Well, bulk of the muscle, see, feel, and measure. Muscle wasting may be very obvious. Feel. A flaccid muscle would be flabby, while a sparse muscle will not be flabby. And finally, to confirm, measure that and record what is the exact amount of muscle wasting, particularly if it is asymmetrical and there is a difference between the two limbs. So see, feel, and measure as far as the bulk of muscles is concerned. Well, talking about the next is the tone of the muscles. Please understand the tone of the muscles would either be, if it is involved, it could be either let me stop the video. It could either be a flaccid paralysis in the case of lower motor neuron paralysis, or it could be a hypertonic paralysis in case of upper motor neuron paralysis. Well, there are two methods to do it. Mostly it is done by log rolling. Log rolling can be done either by rolling over the lower part of the thigh, or better if it is on the shin. That is one method of testing for the amount of tension which is present in the muscles of the lower extremity. Other point is to move the limb to the range of movement and try to assess what is the basic tone of the muscles. Please remember that the increase in tone could either be a clasp knife type or a cogwheel type, which are two most common types. What we and orthopedic patients, in our orthopedic patients, we deal mostly with the clasp knife rigidity. This is an example of that. Please see the video once again. As the examiner starts flexing the limb, there is as if there is an increase of resistance. The examiner goes on flexing the knee, and at a particular time, the limb simply gives way. Please see it once again. Okay, I'll again repeat. that as the examiner flexes the knee, he feels as if the body is offering more resistance. Once he keeps on flexing, at a particular point, the limb gives way like in a clasp knife. This occurs typical in the typical in the patient which we see. See it once again, please. This is important, so I'll spend a moment here. Yes, that's right. These are typical clasp knife rigidity seen in the cases of orthopedic patients. A cogwheel type of rigidity is seen most in extrapyramidal tract lesions. Pyramidal tract lesions, which is not what we see normally. There is an increased resistance, there's increased tone, then less tone, increased tone like a cogwheel. Well, once we have seen the tone, we must comment now about the muscle strength. All of you must be knowing about this MRC grading. I will not go into the details. Grade 0 is the complete paralysis and grade 5 is the normal power. I am not going to repeat it. This is very well known, must be very well known to all of you. Only thing I want to point out the common mistakes with the examinees doing the exam. Once you ask him to test a muscle power, demonstrate a muscle power, many times the candidate simply puts supposing if he is asked to demonstrate the pulsus power, he puts his hand on the patient's lower part of the shin and asks him to extend the limb. But please understand, first make sure that the patient has got at least power 3. Once you have demonstrated the patient has got power 3, only then you demonstrate the further grades. It may happen that you may be checking this way, going straight away, giving the resistance, which will not be the actual power. First, ensure that the patient has got a power 3 at least, like this way, checking for the quadriceps. With the gravity eliminated, see whether the patient is able to extend the knee and then go for grade 4 and grade 5. This is the common mistakes which the candidates do in the exam. Now the next step is we have seen the bulk, we have seen the tone, we have talked about the power from 0 to 5. Then we come to the reflexes. Now reflexes of two types. One are the deep tendon reflexes and the superficial reflexes. Now deep tendon reflexes are the reflexes which are initiated by stimulating a stretched tendon. A tendon is first stretched, then stimulated, which produces a reflex action in that muscle. Now these are all the deep tendon reflexes which we are supposed to examine in the exam, and you have to memorize this particular table. These are the common deep tendon reflexes which we are able to see must examine in the exam. You must remember the muscle which is acting, the cord segment, and which is the peripheral nerve. Once you remember this table, you will be able to realize that if a biceps is absent, then most probably C5 is involved. That way. Now let me show you example of in the further slides. You may not be knowing that the reflexes can also be graded. A grade 0 is the absent reflex. Grade 1 is present like a normal ankle jerk. Grade 2 is brisk like a normal knee jerk. Grade 3 is very brisk, and grade 4 is clonus. Now let me show you how to examine different reflexes. This is the reflex arc of a knee jerk. This is the position in which the knee jerk can be examined. This is the example of a normal knee jerk. The tendon is at a stretch and then the tendon is scoped. This is the example of a knee jerk where there is hyperreflexia. You can see very obviously that the reflexes increase and is most likely a case of upper motor neuron paralysis. The ankle jerk is examined in any of these three ways. Sometimes few examiners like to examine the prone position also. But these are the different ways in which a ankle jerk can be examined. This is the example of a normal ankle jerk. Please note everything the way the examiner is doing this is a normal ankle jerk. This is a increased ankle reflex. Again, upper motor neuron paralysis. Now this is how you see a biceps reflex. The biceps tendon is not stretched, not stroked directly. The thumbnail is put over the put over the tendon and then it is stroked. You can see the normal biceps and now see the increased bicep reflex. This is how the triceps reflex is examined. A normal triceps reflex, I increased triceps reflex. This is how a normal supinator reflex is checked. You see the contraction of the brachioradialis. This is how an increased supinator reflex would look like. Contraction of the brachioradialis. Now there is a small sign which is typical to cervical myelopathy patients. On flicking the distal phalanx, there is involuntary flexion of the rest of the finger phalanges. This is Hoffman sign seen in cervical myelopathy. Now I was talking of grade 4. Sometimes the patellar clonus is there. This is the way the patellar clonus is checked. There is no patellar clonus on this side. You see how patellar clonus is checked. Ensure the patella is moving freely and then give a jerk. This is the example of a actual patellar clonus present. Grade 4 of muscle reflex. Similarly, ankle clonus can be checked in this way. Please see the position of the limb. Hip flexed, knee flexed, sudden jerk to the ankle and it causes, is not so pronounced at this side, it was more pronounced on the right side. Now, this was about deep tendon reflexes. Now we are supposed to check about the superficial reflexes also. The superficial reflexes are so called because they are elicited by stroking a superficial structure like a skin or a cornea. Now these are the superficial reflexes which we are supposed to check in the exam, starting from plantar, sternal, cremastic, bulbocavernous, and abdominal. Again, the candidates are supposed to memorize this chart to know about which is the segment involved and which is the muscle which is involved. I'll show you examples. These are the abdominal reflexes. Now, please see first. All the 4 quadrants of the abdomen are stimulated separately, and the abdominals are checked in that quadrant. Now there are 2 ways of doing it. This is the first way. This is the second way. In all the 4 different quadrants, the stroke is given from outside to inwards. Now please see this video once again. All 4 quadrants separately checked. Now we are talking of plantar reflexes. Plantar reflex. This is the way the plantar aspect of the foot is to be stroked in this manner. This is a normal response when the toes flex, and this is a normal response when there is a dorsiflexion and fanning of the toes. Now let us see. This is the normal response. This is a Babinski sign, which is a typical of upper motor neuron paralysis. Once it is present, there is no doubt about the presence of upper motor neuron paralysis. The next in the list is the cremastic reflex. Once you stroke the upper part of the thigh, the same side of the testicle moves up. This is again a superficial reflex. Now, please see this video carefully, how to check for an ankle wink. The perianal skin and a sphincter. There's one mistake in this video. The examiner is using a hypodermic needle, which should not be used. Use a awl pin to stroke the perianal sensation. Otherwise, the method is correct. Now, bulbocavernous reflex with the one finger inside the anus, the other hand stimulates the glans penis, and the finger inside the rectum feels for the contraction of the bulbo cavernous, as far as the male is concerned. The other hand feels for the contraction of the bulbo cavernous. In the females, it is done either by pulling on the catheter or by pressing on the mons pubis, while the one hand feels for pulling on the catheter and feeling for the contraction. Now the motor system is over. I'll come to the sensory system. You have to memorize the different tracts of the sensory system. I'll not go into details of these. Just for the sake of simplicity, these are the different modalities in the sensation to be checked: pain, temperature, touch, and joint sensation, proprioception, vibration. Pain and temperature are by the spinothalamic tracts. Half of the touch is also by the spinothalamic tracts. The relative half is by the rest. All are from the dorsal tracts, which are dealing mostly with the vibration, position, sense, and stereognosis. Now I'll make it simpler for you to examine the sensory system. This is how you are supposed to examine all these modalities, which I'll show you by example. I'll not talk about this table. I already simplified it. You have to remember these dermatomes. You must, at the end of the examination, you must be able to find out that which dermatome is affected. Only then you will have to decipher which is the level of the spinal cord injury or spinal cord insult. This is how you check the light touch. Either use the cotton in this manner, the manner shown, or even using a tip of the finger. Finger is also an internationally accepted method. Either of these two methods can be applied. Now, to check for the superficial pain, use a ordinary awl pin. Never use a hypodermic needle. Or there are special needle pins which are available, and you can use these pins to check for the superficial pain. Otherwise, a simple awl pin will suffice. Now, the previous which I have shown you is about the spinothalamic tract, about the dorsal tracts. These are the things which have to be checked. 2-point discrimination. If you remember your UG level neurology, different parts of the body can discriminate between the 2 points at a certain distance. A fingertip is able to discriminate at a very small distance, while the back of the hand, back skin can differentiate with a very large distance. This is what I mean. A fingertip will be able to distinguish a very small distance, while the back skin will be able to differentiate a very, very large gap. These are, criteria for the different areas of the body are given in the books. One has to know them, and then one can compare them in your patient if you know the normal. Position sense, you must. This is again a posterior column sensation. One wants to understand whether the patient is able to decipher the position of the joint or not. There are different steps. Shield the patient's eye. Explain the procedure to the patient first. What do you mean by up or down or neutral? The patient must know what you mean. Patient should be relaxed, and patient response is taken as either up, down, or neutral, or the neutral position. The examiner holds the proximal phalanx from the sides between the thumb and the index finger, and with the other hand, he gives 3 or 4 movements of the IPU joint of the great toe, and then holds in a particular position. Now, and then asks the patient in which position the thumb is. Please see this. Asking the patient which position. Asking the patient. Asking the patient. Asking the patient. This is how it is checked. Now, this is just for the sake of completion, that the patient is able to recognize the size, shape, and weight and the form by holding different objects with his eyes closed. I think the last and this is the sensory system is about the vibration. For this, tuning fork is to be used. mostly a 128 hertz or maximum 256 hertz tuning fork can be used. First, demonstrate to the patient what is meant by this test by stroking the tuning fork and keeping on a bony point, which is normal. Let the patient understand this is most likely to be normal in an orthopedic patient. Keep the stroked tuning fork on the lateral of the clavicle and let the patient know what is meant by vibration. And then you can check on the different bony points whether the patient is able to appreciate the vibration of the tuning fork or not. And you must compare the two sides if there is asymmetrical paralysis. Now, this is the usual sequence which is seen in our patients. Once you are examining a patient of a let us say as dorsal spine tuberculosis and examining the sensory loss from above downwards, patient will have a normal sensation till a particular level. Then from a small area, it may be a particular loss, maybe 50% loss. And after that beyond that area, there is a complete loss. This is a usual sequence which is found in the orthopedic patient: normal above, then reduced sensations, and then absence of sensations. Now you must make a note of the bladder and bowel involvement. I can't discuss in details, but I'll give you a small idea about the things about the bladder. I'll not discuss the blood supply, but please remember these are the hallmarks of involving the bladder. Is there any perineal anesthesia? Whether the patient is able to have voluntary anal contraction, whether the great toe flexion is there or not. I'll just very briefly, I'll just remind the listeners about the order of the neurological examination. Higher functions, cranial nerves, then motor system. Motor system was bulk, power, tone, and reflexes. Reflexes were dependent reflexes and the superficial reflexes. Then sensory system. Sensory system I had told how to examine the fine touch, the pain, and the temperature and the vibration, and all those things. Then we come to the bladder. Bladder, I had told you that the most critical thing is to decide about sacral sparing. That is whether there is a voluntary control of greater toe flexion, whether the sensation around the anus is present or not. These things do decide about the sacral sparing. If sacral sparing is there, the bladder function will come back. If the sacral sparing is not there, then we have to follow this simple statement which I have shown on the slide, whether to decide about whether there is an upper motor neuron paralysis bladder or a lower motor neuron or a mixed bladder. A lesion which is above T11 vertebra would have a spastic bladder. Means the bladder, there will be a failure to fill. There is a repeated urine discharge. If the lesion is beyond L2, it is mostly quadratic minor, and mostly it is a lower motor neuron bladder in which the bladder distends, and only then there is overflowing confidence. If there is involvement of T12 to L1, then there is a mixed picture because conus as well as chorda is involved. This is in short about bladder. I'll not go into details of this. The same thing. Now you must do a PR examination to rule out any abscess present in the rectal examination. Make a note of the different any bed sore present. There are 4 different grades, starting from just peeling of the superficial skin to the most deep grade 4 bed sore, in which the deeper structures up to bone are involved. Then, if you remember, I had told from the very beginning that at the end of the examination, we should be able to answer 3 or 4 questions, whether the deficit is upper motor neuron or lower motor neuron. Now, these are the differentiating features between upper motor neuron lesion and the lower motor neuron lesion. The major ones are that in upper motor neuron lesion, there is increase in the tone. I had shown you example of a clasp knife increased tone. While in the case of lower motor neuron lesion, there will be loss of tone. Deep tendon reflexes will be increased in upper motor neuron. They will be decreased in lower motor neuron. Superficial reflexes will be absent in a case of upper motor neuron. In a case of lower motor neuron, they will be present unless the very segments which are supplying that particular superficial reflex are also involved. So this is in short the differentiation between upper motor neuron and the lower motor neuron lesions. Then we are supposed to tell what is the integration between the spinal vertebral level and the spinal cord level. If the candidates remember, the length of the vertebral column is more than the spinal cord. Spinal cord is short, so the segments in the spinal cord and the segments of the vertebral column, they are not corresponding. I'll make it more clear with the next slide. Supposing if there is a involvement of T7 dorsal 6 vertebra, there is, let us say there is a fracture of dorsal 6 vertebra, the spinal cord segment which will be involved will be dorsal 8. This is the formula which is used. If there is a dorsal 9 vertebra which is involved, the spinal cord segment which is involved will be, let us say, dorsal 12. This formula is to memorize by the candidates to integrate the two levels. Now then we have to decide, answer the question, what is the plane of the spinal cord, extradural or intradural? Extradural, there are two things which are very, very pertinent. If there is a deformity and the tenderness. If the deformity and the tenderness is present in the examination, it is most likely a extradural compression. If the deformity and the tenderness are absent, there is no deformity and the spine is not tender, is likely to be intradural. To differentiate between intramedullary and extramedullary is little difficult, but in general, intramedullary lesions which will have neurological deficit much earlier than the extramedullary. This is the basic difference between the plane of the cord compression. I'll show you an example. Like in this patient who has got an obvious deformity at around D4 level. There is he has got all these findings present. Basically, he has got an angular deformity and tenderness. The deficit in this patient is likely to be extradural. Now, the other question to be answered about, what is the extent of the deficit? Can we tell the stage of the disease? Now, this is the staging of the disease which has been devised by Dr. Tully and Dr. Kumar for tuberculosis of the spine. Grade 1 stage, when the deficit is minimum, even the patient may not be aware. When the doctor examines, he finds that the patient has got very fine signs of upper motor neuron paralysis. Gradually, these stages goes on increasing, and in the stage 4, which is the most severe, there is a flexor spasm, paralysis in flexion, and there is a sphincter involvement. So these are the stages which have been described for tuberculosis, but we can superimpose these stages on other diseases also to tell about the severity of the disease. So once, as far as the final diagnosis for a spinal disease is concerned, the candidate at the end of the examination must be able to tell whether it is an extradural compressive myelopathy, what is the stage of the paraplegia, what is the vertebral level, what is the dermatomal level, and what is the likely etiology. This should be the final diagnosis as far as the candidate is concerned at the end of the spine examination.